The door trapped, and it was a lassie. She says, Tracey's room curtains are shut. She says it's unusual, and the veranda door is wide open. So I shut the door and I opened the veranda, and I looked through and the veranda door was open. So I climbed door and made my way in. When I got down to the hall, I put the light on. That's when I seen her lying across the bed. I didn't stay on long, I just came back out. I think it was just a shock. So the lassie had come in. I went back in there, but I didn't get back into the room. The lassie came back running out screaming and says, Tracey's dead, she's dead.
On the Monday I was going to see Tracey up at her house, and I'd got off the bus, and I just remember seeing a lot of police cars along at her close where she lived, and the neighbours were out, and one of them then came over to me and said, you need to go and speak to the police. So I'd seen the tape, and that's when I knew that it was serious. And when I went in, the police then told me that Tracey had died, but hadn't told me like why or what had happened or anything. I just collapsed at the close.
But when I went up to see Tracey, the police cars were at the close. And when I went up the stair, police wouldn't let me in at first. I said, it's my daughter. Says she's been murdered.
Coming to terms with an overdose would have been hard enough, but murder was almost incomprehensible.
We knew Tracey's kind of lifestyle, but you never really think things like that will happen to somebody that's close to you. It's always somebody else or something you read about and things, and it was just very traumatic.
But I actually thought at the time that it would have been an overdose. I didn't expect to find out that it had actually been a murder. That was the last thing that I was obviously expecting to hear.
Although news of Tracey's murder had barely even begun to sink in, family and friends had to put grief aside in order to help detectives.
There was a lot of questions, a lot of people about. Our area was kind of cordoned off. There was police about. There was a police information van parked outside our house. Everywhere you went, somebody was speaking about it in the street. I got a lot of visits at work with some CID and police and things like that.
Certain facts couldn't be ignored, and the media were the first to pick up on them.
The day after her body was discovered, I got a phone call from a police contact to say yet another prostitute had been found murdered in Glasgow. This was a sensational turn of events. It was the sixth murder of a prostitute in as many years. The previous 5 police investigations had come against a brick wall. No one had yet been convicted of any of the murders, and I knew that this would once again raise the spectre of a serial killer in Glasgow murdering prostitutes.
Tracey's death spread fear and alarm among the women in the red light district. Yet another prostitute had been murdered. Was there a serial killer on the loose? 21-year-old Tracey Wylde's murder was headline news. She was the latest in a long list of Glasgow prostitutes to be killed. Despite barely having time to absorb the facts, her family were forced to show their grief in public in a bid to help catch her killer.
I know that my daughter was a prostitute and frequented the red light area. I'm aware of her activities.
Tracey's murder spread fear throughout Glasgow's red light district, with many of the women scared to go out in the streets.
I knew Tracey would be working on the street. I was scared and I was young. At the time I'm 25 now, so I would have been about 16, 17. So I was quite young, and that was the first person and I think that got murdered when I started working. Knowing that that person's still in the street, and I could have been the next one, or somebody else could have been the next one to get murdered. You don't know. You don't know who you're going to be when you get in a car. I mean, if you don't know if you're going to come back out alive. You know what I mean? It's a dangerous game.
There was a fear amongst prostitutes, and we tried to reassure them as much as possible, and there was a lot of speculation in the media at the time about a serial killer. We had strong reason to believe that that was not the case. There were a number of other inquiries, and as a consequence of those inquiries, people were reported to the Procurator Fiscal for those murders. So we were satisfied, and still are satisfied, that there was no serial killer in Glasgow at the time.
Whether the murders were the work of one man or several, The initial assumption was that the killer was a client. As with many prostitute murders, the investigation proved to be difficult.
The investigation of a prostitute murder is so different from any other. First of all, by the very nature of what the women do, you're very unlikely to have any witnesses, because although the women stand on an open street to ply their trade, to perform any sexual activity, they're in a car, in a lonesome car park, they're up a lane, they're in a pen, they go somewhere where they're not going to be seen, and that's why CCTV cameras are so important. And for people that do see them, you're not going to get clients coming forward, because they shouldn't be there in the first place. Most are married men from public life. They just shouldn't be there, and the last thing they want to be known is that they have been in the red light area.
There's a variety of different people use the red light area for a variety of different reasons, many of whom are perfectly law-abiding individuals, and it may well be that the person who has been responsible for Tracey's murder has never came to the attention of the police since, and may not come to the attention of the police in the future.
One of the biggest challenges for police was obtaining DNA samples from clients. More than 2,000 men were eventually tested.
For the first time in Scotland, we had a large-scale murder investigation where police were using DNA to try and catch the killer. As part of the ongoing investigation, they identified around 40 of our customers from a diary that she kept. Each of these men were DNA tested.
DNA may not have led the police to the killer, but had CCTV captured his image? Detectives pieced together Tracey's last movements and established that she had been back to her flat with at least 2 clients.